Hello, Breakfast Club. Welcome to Monday with Got That Funk. Thanks for joining me. I wanted to talk about the problem of radical Islamic terrorism. This video is prompted by comments left by Brock Lawley and also my friend Marv Roberts on the video I did a few weeks ago called End the Drone War. In his comment, Marv was expressing his extreme frustration with the recent spike in radical Islamic terrorism this year. And in his comment, Brock Lawley asked me the very serious question, what do I think we should do about this very real problem, as he describes it? And it's undoubtedly true that whatever way you want to term it, whether you want to call it radical Islamic terrorism or fundamentalist Islamic terrorism or whatever you want to call it, it doesn't necessarily matter what we label it at this point, as far as I'm concerned. We all know what we're talking about, regardless of what term you use to describe it. And I think framing the argument is important. I'm not saying the terms we describe it with are not important, but I think ultimately we should stop arguing about minutiae, like what we call the problem, and start talking more about how we should actually deal with it, which is the question I'm trying to answer. But I won't be able to answer it in one video, not by a long way. I've already tried. I've tried several attempts at making this video, and the shortest I could edit my thoughts down to was well over half an hour long, and I'm just not going to make a Breakfast Club video that stands alone at more than half an hour. So I'm afraid I'm going to make this a series of videos, and it's not going to be what I talk about every single week for week after week in a row. But every once in a while I'm going to bring this topic back up and address it from a completely different angle. Because it's my opinion that one problem that we have with discussing this topic is it is extremely complicated, and the temptation in online discussions especially is to try to oversimplify things. This is also true in TV and the way the media handles this topic. I think the media has an awful lot to answer for, and I'll be talking about the media's role in this in a future video. I'm also going to be talking about the problems we have with our foreign policy a little bit more. I'm also going to be talking about what I think we can do internationally to deal with this problem that's more effective than what we're doing right now. Because ultimately I think we need to acknowledge that what we're doing right now and what we've been doing for the past 15 or 16 years isn't really working. What have we done? We've gone around the world, we've invaded 2 countries and occupied 2 countries, and we've helped destabilize another 6 or 7. Okay? We still have ongoing drone campaigns in 7 countries that I'm aware of. And the bottom line is, if you have a foreign policy where you're occasionally killing innocent civilians, recently an attack in Syria killed more than 100, or sorry, Iraq killed more than 100 civilians again, it's not good enough to just go, hey, we didn't mean to, and expect everybody to just go, okay, well, hey, they didn't mean to, so we're not going to be mad about it. That's just unrealistic. It's also unrealistic to think that you can bomb your way to peace. That's absurd, right? It's self-evidently absurd. Now, I've said this in a video on my own channel regarding this exact topic, but I think it bears repeating. It's been my observation after 55 orbits around the sun that there are 3 basic ways that you can end a conflict. One side either beats the other side into utter submission and they have to surrender. In the case of radical Islamic terrorism, since we cannot necessarily identify radical Islamic terrorists by looking at them, you're basically implying that you just have to kill anyone who might be a terrorist that fits that mold, and you're talking about genocide on a scale that would dwarf anything we've seen before. That's obviously not acceptable. So option 1 is really not an option. Option 2 is you basically would have to, in this instance, make Islam illegal, which is not only contrary to the fundamental principle that everybody should have the freedom of belief, but it would be a logistical nightmare. It would definitely inspire more terrorism. And more to the point, it's contrary to freedom completely. Do we believe in freedom of religion, or do we not? I can't believe that Katie Hopkins and others recently have been discussing internment as if it's a viable option or something that we should even contemplate in any serious way. It's essentially fascist to declare someone a criminal for what they believe. So option 2 really isn't an option. Option 3, as far as I can see it, is to try to find some kind of a way to live together in peace. This means we all have to be involved. This means people on the street need to be involved. People in the media need to be involved. Our politicians need to be involved in a much more productive way than they are at the moment. I would say the same thing about the media. And, for that matter, the general population as well. And I include myself in this. I try my very best to be open-minded and understanding and so on. But occasionally, like everybody else, I'm sure, sometimes I find myself slipping in little prejudiced thoughts which I don't really want to be there. It just happens. We're surrounded by it. We're bombarded by it on a regular basis. And we have to question why and whose interest is this to keep stoking these flames. But I'll get off on that in a future video. I think we need to recognize the uncomfortable truth that there's nothing you can do that will totally prevent terrorism. What you can do is try to create a better world, a world where people are generally prosperous, not just in your own country, but everywhere else. I think you'll find that people who are prosperous and happy are less likely to want to strap a bomb on and kill other people. Call me a hippie. I happen to think it's true. And on that note, I want to share one final thing with you. I know this video is already running on longer than I wanted it to, but weekend before last, the terrorist attack happened at London Bridge, and 7 people were killed, dozens more were injured, and the terrorists obviously were killed as well. And one thing that happens every time there's a radical Islamic terrorist incident is a lot of people online jump up and down complaining that normal Muslims aren't speaking out against this sort of thing. And I've always been saying that yes, they are. You just aren't hearing that on the news. I mean, certainly if you're on Twitter, there's any number of hashtags that you can follow after a terrorist attack where you will see Muslims denouncing this sort of thing. But I've recently had a personal experience here in London as a result of this. I was getting off the train on Tuesday after work last week, and someone handed me a rose outside of the train station. It was a white rose and an envelope, and I thought it was like for a charity. So I went to reach for my pocket. He said, "Oh, it's for the terrorist thing in London," and I thought it was going to be for a charity. So I started to reach for money. He said, "Oh, no, we don't want your money. We just want to give you this rose and this letter." And I said, "Okay, thank you." And obviously I took the rose, put it in water, and it's still in the living room now. It's still in bloom, surprisingly. Anyway, and they gave me this letter. And I want to share portions of this letter with you. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's 3 pages long, and there's some parts of it that I know for a fact will piss members of the audience off because they go in to defend Islam and why they think terrorism is contrary to Islam. And I don't think that's a discussion I need to have in this video. But I do want to share the very salient points in this letter here. Please indulge me. To our precious neighbor and friend, we are your Muslim friends and neighbors originally from Turkey, living in Kingston. This letter and the rose to you are with our sincere intention of a humble contribution to the unity, cohesion, and solidarity of our local community and of our broader society in response to the recent terrorist attacks in London and in the UK. In fact, we have long been carrying the pain and sadness of the so many ruthless incidents of a similar nature that happened in the UK, in Turkey, and elsewhere. The attacks yesterday night in London left us with a further pain and disappointment. Then, such feelings pushed us to not be shy, but to extend our humble responses against terrorism with this letter and this rose from our hearts. Precious neighbor and friend, please give us a few minutes of your attention to express our understanding of these ruthless incidents and to conclude with a call for a common philosophy of response to them, to the extent that you may agree. Yesterday night and before, we were all attacked as the civilized world, living together in peace and advancing the common civilization of humankind through collaboration. They were us all who were killed and wounded, and we are us all who mourn, together to heal our wounds, keeping special focus on the immediate victims. I'm going to skip a bit now and move on to another salient part. A full range of measures against it will take too long to describe, but the most effective one should be mentioned. Relentless commitment to love, compassion, empathy, and communication to empower unity, cohesion, and solidarity. Terrorism works using hatred and prejudices to generate violence, knowing that violence will generate further violence and more prejudice. By means of violence, it purposefully damages social relations with reduced peaceful communications and interactions and induces unthoughtful reactions. This way, it recruits and fuels its brainwashed robots with further hatred and prejudices, resulting in a vicious circle. So the best response is with love, compassion, empathy, and communication to empower unity, cohesion, and solidarity. Then it goes on a little bit to talk about the Quran and why they think terrorism is contrary to the teachings in Islam, but I'm not going to talk about that with this video. And then it goes on to conclude. As a result, any terrorist organizations who kidnap Islamic names or terms from Islamic resources are definitely not Islamic. Founders, leaders, members, and supporters of terrorism are the most deceitful, cowardly, and undignified enemies of Islam and of humanity. Now, this is the most important part of the letter, and I want you all to pay close attention to this paragraph. Despite all this, we also must see that the fact that anti-terror civil activism in Muslim communities is apparently below enough, even if it is above what is perceived. Although the vast majority of Muslims have clear anti-terrorist beliefs and peaceful daily manners, their culture of anti-terrorism activism is generally weak, just like their culture of civil activism in many other contexts. So we must work hard to stimulate, inspire, encourage, and empower civil activism, especially against terrorism. Similar cultural empowerment is also very important to change the violent tendencies of exploited people to civilized, peaceful, constructive ways of defending rights and demanding justice. Precious neighbor and friend, having said all the above, please let us all relentlessly commit together to means of factor and unity, cohesion and solidarity for efforts to rehabilitate the current extent of this globally spread disease and to prevent its further destructions socially and emotionally. We believe doing so is a duty not only for us, to God, but also to our local and global communities and to our children and grandchildren, who all may question how well we did for them. It is too late for yesterday, but it may not be too late for tomorrow. In any case, it must not be any later than today. They do speak out, and they do recognize that there are problems within their own community that they are the only ones who can solve. They need our help. One way that common people who are not Muslims can help is by doing your best not to allow anti-Muslim bigotry and sentiments along that line to creep in. By alienating the minorities in our community, we insulate them. We make them insular. They turn in on themselves. They need to depend on themselves because they learn that they can't depend on us. We don't treat them like they're part of us. And we need to treat them like they're part of us. We need to treat them like they belong with us so that we won't seem like their adversary. That's only one step. We need to do an awful lot more. We need to turn the heat down on this topic completely. The media especially has work to do in this regard, and that's what I'm going to talk about the next time I talk about this issue on The Breakfast Club. I look forward to a vigorous discussion in the comments section down below, and I will see you again next week. Until then, thanks for watching, and may all your ups and downs be ups.